Insist. Hello, everybody.
You let my mute off. Can leave it open?
Yeah, as long as there's no background noises. It's fine.
Feel free.
There's nobody home.
Feel free and kick in whenever you want. Okay, so last week we did introduction number 1 of 2. Today we're going to do introduction 2 of 2 to the period of Shivat Tzion that we're talking about. Last week we saw the, I think, very technical, dry, historical background, right? This is what happened first, this is what happened next, this is the chronology of the last kings, the years, this galut, that galut, the Assyrians got rid of the northern kingdom and the Babylonians got rid of this, so right? We did all that history stuff last week. Okay, what I want to do today in introduction number 2, and then next week we can actually start looking at Sefer Ezra, I hope. I want to backtrack a little bit and look at the mental state of the people who are going through this. Okay, look a little bit at what the people are saying, what the Navi is saying that the people are saying, and what the feelings are during that time. Okay. All right. So actually, I do have a little bit of a PowerPoint here, just because going back. Yeah. Well, don't get used to it. Just because I figured it'll be a little bit easier since I'm going to be going back and forth a bunch. Okay. So first I want to backtrack and just show you something very interesting in Sefer Yechezkel. Okay, Yechezkel was a Navi before and during the time of the Churban, of the destruction and galut of Bavel, right? The main Churban after Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, but also beforehand. He had left beforehand to Bavel, and he is sitting and prophesying in Bavel with his group of people who sit around him, with him, and he gives his prophecies from there and warns them and comforts them, and we even have the time at which he gets the notification of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. That's also recorded in Sefer Yechezkel. So he's sitting there doing his thing. But he has a bunch, and what's especially interesting about Yechezkel, this is totally anomalous from all the other Navim, he's the only Navi that we know of that prophesies in Chutz La'aretz. Unless you want to count Moshe, but that doesn't count because Moshe was before we had a not Chutz La'aretz. So he's once we entered Eretz Yisrael, all the Nevi'im that we have prophesy in Eretz Yisrael. I guess you can make little exceptions here and there, like Yonah, who went to Nineveh or whatever. I know you were thinking of that. I saw it on your face. But generally speaking, Yechezkel is the bulk of his prophecy is in Chutz La'aretz, which is kind of odd. Okay. So I want to look at some of the visions that he had throughout his book. Okay, vision number 1. I'm giving you very, very small snippets and completely out of context. But all these snippets that we're going to look at come in context of God spoke to me and he showed me and he told me and he said to me and he's warning me about the Churban. They're all like that. Okay, but we have different stages in these kind of prophecies. And the first snippet I want to look at is when Yechezkel says one of the things that he sees when he's God shows him a vision of what's going on in Yerushalayim. It says Ukvod. Why is my thing doing this? Ukvod Elohei Yisrael Na'ala Me'al HaKruv. Okay, not talking about cabbage. We're talking about the Kruvim, right? And the Aron HaKodesh. There are 2 Kruvim. Right, and the Midrashim will tell you they face each other when things are good, they face away, whatever. Okay, but they're 2 Kruvim, and Chazal teach us that one of the functions of the Kruvim was to be the place, the physical place, which enabled some sort of interaction between God and the people. That's where the Shechina appeared to the. I don't beats me how this thing works. Okay, but that's the Kruvim are a symbol of the connection between God and Am Yisrael, and that's where Kivyachol the Shechina rested when it came into Kodesh HaKodashim. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show you that he sees here, that he sees, is that the Kvod Elohei Yisrael the Shechina Na'ala Me'al HaKruv. if it usually resides in the Kruvim, in this first Nevuah that I brought to you, he's kind of hovering above it. The Shekhinah is hovering above, which is kind of a sort of disconnect, right? It's like God is saying, I'm on hold, right? I'm not there online. I'm on hold, right? I'm a little bit above. The next parak, he sees another vision, and in this vision it says, "Vayarem kvod Hashem me'al akruv al miftan habayit." Okay, now he sees the Shekhinah, which had already been disconnected from these kruvim above them. Now he sees them the Shekhinah kind of traveling to the entrance of Beit HaMikdash, right? Shekhinah has not yet left Beit HaMikdash, but you kind of see the movement, right, out. And the next one we hear like this. Vayitze kvod Hashem me'al miftan habayit. Kvod Hashem, the Shekhinah, departs from the entrance to the Beit, from the entrance to Beit HaMikdash. Vayamod ala kruvim, and it stands be'ala kruvim. It goes back to the kruvim. Vayis'u hakruvim et kanfeihem. The kruvim raise their wings. Vayaromu me'al min haaretz le'enai betzeitam. And the Shekhinah, which is now residing above the kruvim where it belongs, now the kruvim themselves rise up with their wings, right? And they carry the Shekhinah from the land, like from earth, heaven bound, I guess, or up. And Yechezkel sees this, betzeitam, as they leave, va'ofanim leumatam, and the ofanim, which are those whatever creatures which mobilize God's merkava, God's chariot, so to speak. Vayamod petach hashar beit Hashem akadmoni, and the chariot and the kruvim and the Shekhinah stands at the entrance of the gate to the east. The Kadmoni is the east. Ukvod Elohei Yisrael alehem midamala, and the Shekhinah is above them. And the last such description we have is Vayis'u hakruvim et knanfeihem. The kruvim flap their wings. Va'ofanim leumatam, the ofanim with them. Ukvod Elohei Yisrael alehem midamala. That's what we saw before. And the next step is Vaya'al kvod Hashem me'al toch ha'ir. It goes, the Kvod Hashem, the Shekhinah, goes above the city, above Yerushalayim. Vaya'amod al hahar asher mikedem la'ir, and it resides on the mountain east of the city. Okay, I want to talk about this for a second. Okay, we have a very visual, vivid description, right, of the Shekhinah, which is supposed to, or usually, that's the point of the whole, right, the whole Kodesh of Kodashim and Aaron and Kruvim, to have some sort of a connection with God. So we see visually, or Yechezkel visually sees and describes how the Shekhinah rises up with the Kruvim, with the Ofanim, with the chariot, and goes up and out of Beit HaMikdash and east and out of the gate and over the city and to the mountain east. Okay, so now we have the removal of the Shekhinah from Yerushalayim towards the east. Now the question is, what does this signify? And this is going to come in within the larger, huge question, which is going to hover over all of people's mentalities and thoughts and mindset and theology during all of Beit Sheni. There is the people who lived at the time of the destruction and the exile never experienced a destruction and exile, right? They had the mindset of, well, we were a nation that formed, went to Egypt, God took us out of Egypt, we came, we fought our battles, we had our ups, we had our downs, we had our wars, we had whatever, but since Shlomo built the Beit HaMikdash, there's always been a Beit HaMikdash, right?
Right.
And as far as many people were concerned, Beit HaMikdash, since it is God's house, is indestructible, right? Just like God is indestructible, why would God, right? That's God's house is indestructible. It's undefeatable. And in order for the people to be safe, all we had to do was continue to do whatever avoda we're doing in the Beit HaMikdash. If we need to bring a korban, we'll bring a korban. If we need to do whatever we need to do, all the Kohanim stuff, then that's what we'll do. And that's just going to perpetuate forever because, people could be defeated in war, but not God. And then all of a sudden you have this new reality in which Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. Now, what does that mean? Go ahead. There are a few options here. What could it mean if Beit HaMikdash is destroyed?
That Hashem has abandoned us.
That's one option. Okay. I'm going to go to the option that you're not saying, in which.
Well, that Hashem will accompany them wherever they're going.
Okay, that's a nicer one. I'm going to start with the nastier ones first. Okay. Option number one, which I'm sure many people must have been thinking at the time, given the general ancient Near Eastern theology that says that a war between two peoples is actually a war between their gods, right? So if God's house is destroyed and God is exiled, here we see God is exiled and the people are exiled, maybe God lost. Okay. Many people must have thought that. Many people must have thought, well, if this is what happened, then I don't know if there is a God or there isn't a God, but whatever it is, he's obviously less strong than the Babylonian God. The Babylonian God, Marduk, must have defeated him. Maybe, I don't know if he's still around. Something along those lines. Okay, that's option one. Option two is, like you said, God abandoned us. Okay, and if God abandoned us on purpose, right, because we deserved it, because maybe they finally believed all the Nevi'im who've been telling them forever, like Yirmiyahu said, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. Everybody's saying Beit HaMikdash, Beit HaMikdash. All we need to do is Beit HaMikdash. It'll be safe forever. Maybe they finally Nafala Simon, and they understand that they're being punished, right? And God did this deliberate. God didn't lose. God chose to get up and leave. God chose to allow the enemy to destroy Beit HaMikdash. God chose to let the Babylonians exile our people, maybe. But even so, we still have two options. Option one is, well, we reneged on our part of the covenant, of the Brit. And so God said, fine, goodbye, not interested anymore. And that's the end of the Brit. So God is strong and God is all capable and God is the same God we knew him to be, but God is no longer interested in us as a people. That certainly had to be an option too, right? And then there's a third option, which Adele is raising and saying, well, maybe God chose to punish us, but somewhere in the back of something, God still loves us. And there's a possibility of returning and being one big happy family again.
Well,
right?
He chose us.
He chose us, but he could unchoose us.
But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that again, but it together with it chose us, we also have it's kind of confusing because there are two parallel strands of promises throughout Tanakh, from the beginning to the end. One strand is, I chose you, you are my people, le'olam, forever, vayhima. That's like a parent. That's Avinu, right? No matter what your kid is going to do, he's still going to be your kid. You could be angry with him from him to here to next year. He's still your kid.
Right.
The other option is the option of Malkeinu, right? And the other strand that we see in Tanakh is the if-then option. If you do mitzvot and do keep the Torah and do whatever you're supposed to do, then God will be your God, etc., etc. But if not, not. Right? And those two strands of promises are in tension with each other because you can't have it both ways. Because once we sin so much to deserve the exile and the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, which strand do you follow? Do you follow the Avinu strand? Well, God is still waiting for us to return. Or do you follow the Malkeinu strand of, okay, God had enough with us, fed up with us, he'll find himself in other people because we obviously failed, right? And both options are open. And so people must have been thinking both options, right? So you're taking, Adele, the kinder route and saying, well, God rising, the Shekhinah rising up from the Beit HaMikdash and moving east out of the city is kind of like we had to move east and God is coming with us. That's nice. That's one option, right? The other option is, no, we're gone. Okay. The one that you're raising is I think I don't remember which Navi says, but Imo Anochi B'tzara, I am with you. We're gonna get back to that. Okay, that God is with us in our exile. Okay. There's also terrific nevuot. The people who remained back in Eretz Israel, right? Not everybody left. Remember, there was some remnant. Eventually, and Gedaliah, the Babylonians placed Gedaliah as regional leader over the Judeans, and for whatever political reasons, he was assassinated, and then everybody exiled to Egypt. Everybody who was left, okay? But there were still some people left after the exile, and there must have been the question of, well, are we the righteous Jews who remained in Israel because God didn't exile us, and so this is what God wants us to be doing? Or as the Navi says, I believe it's Yirmiyahu, who said no, the ones that he wanted to save were actually exiled. The ones that are left are the ones, it's a punishment to stay back, right? This is all very confusing, and people at the time had no way to know. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay, so when we hear about the Shekhinah leaving Beit Hamikdash, we know that the period of Beit Hamikdash Rishon is over. There's no Beit Hamikdash, there's no Shekhinah there. People are dispersed, and it seems like God is dispersed as well. And then the question is, what is it which of the options that we raised before of what do we think about this and how can we understand this? What is it that people are thinking? Okay, that's where we're headed today. Questions? We're good? Okay. So let's go back to this. The first thing we see, and we know it's first because it's really on the way out. Al Naharot Bavel. You all know the song, or many of you know this Tehillim, right? Al Naharot Bavel Sham Yashavnu Gam Bachinu Bezechoyne Tzion. Right? We sat on the rivers of Bavel. We sat and we cried, remembering Tzion. Okay, this is actually one of the more conclusive mizmorim to prove that David HaMelech did not write all the mizmorim. Right, because this is way after David's 800 years or so after David Melech's time, unless you said he said it in Nevuah, but this sounds pretty descriptive. So David HaMelech may have written most of Tehillim, but this is one of the ones that kind of prove that this was not written by David HaMelech. Al arevim betochat halinu kinorotenu. We hung up our I don't know if kinor, I don't know if it's a violin, it's some sort of musical instrument that they hung their lyre, right? They hung up on a tree, right? Why did they hang up their musical instruments? Kisham she'elunu shovenu divrei shir v'tolalenu simcha shiru lanu mishir sion. Our captors, right? Our shovenu, those who we are our chatufim, right? We were taken captive, and our captives had told us to play music, divrei shir, and they asked us to make merry, and they said, "Sing to us from the songs of Tzion." And we said, "Ech nashirat shir Hashem al admat necher." How could we possibly sing Hashem's song on foreign land? Okay, that's already a theological statement. It's not only, how could we possibly be happy when we are in Galut? It's maybe a deeper question of, can God be worshipped in Galut? Right? That's an interesting question because, again, given the other ancient Near Eastern thought at the time, people, a god was kind of connected to a territory, right? We saw that last week when we saw how the people, the Samaritans who settled in the northern kingdom, and with the lions that came in and devoured them, they said, well, because we don't know how to worship the god of this territory, so the Assyrian king, remember, sent them a Kohen to teach them how to worship our God because he's God of the land, right? So they're saying, wait, if God is God of Israel, right, then God is maybe not God in Chutz La'aretz, so maybe we can't worship God in Chutz La'aretz. Maybe there's only an issue of worshiping God in Eretz Israel. Now that sounds to us crazy because we're used to here, there, up, down, here, there, and everywhere, right? God is throughout the whole world, but even we have the concept of mitzvot tluyot ba'aretz, right? There's some mitzvot you can only do in Israel. Trumot and Masrot, you only do in Israel. Right? There are other ones that Chazal make us do in Chutz La'aretz, like Challah, for example, but that's also only in Israel. So there is some sort of thing of certain kinds of worship that you can only do in Israel. So they say, how can we possibly Nashir Shir Hashem Ad Barucha? And then they vow. We all know this. We will never forget Yerushalayim. Okay, when they leave, these first generation people, remember they were in Chutz La'aretz and Galut for 70 years minimum, right? Those who came back after 70 years came back after 70, some didn't, right? But the earliest people who came back were after 70 years. 70 years is what, 2 generations at least? Yeah. So the first generation vowed, we will never forget Jerusalem, which makes sense, right? They're still traumatized by this whole business. And then we don't need to read this. God, they're asking for nakama against Edom because Edom helped the Bavlim, and against Bavel. May God repay you for your evil, whatever. Okay, so this is first generation. First generation say, I don't know how we could possibly worship God on foreign land, and they swear to never forsake Yerushalayim. Okay, that's the mindset of the first generation who left. We get some sort of glimpse into maybe later on, or maybe at the same time, in a different place. But now we hear what Yechezkel says, and he's also quoting the people. And from this, we can also get some sort of understanding of what, what their mental process or their theology or what it is that they were thinking or believing at the time. Yechezkel says like this. And again, I'm taking all these things completely out of context, but bear with me. V'ha'oleh al ruchachem, which means that which you are thinking or assuming. I keep losing my mouse, sorry. Hayo lo tiyeh, will not happen. In other words, whatever it is that you're thinking, guys, you're wrong. What is it that they're thinking? Asher atem omrim. You guys, you, says Yechezkel to people, you're saying, but you're wrong. Nihiyeh chagoim. We're going to be like all these goyim. Kemishpachot ha'aratzot. We're going to be like all these nations of the world. L'sharet eitz va'even. We're going to serve trees and rocks. In other words, idols. In other words, they're saying listen, we're in Galus. God left us. There's no way to worship God in Chutz La'aretz, even if God didn't intend to leave us. Eventually, we're going to assimilate. We're going to be like everybody else. We're going to worship the idols just like all our neighbors. This is a hopeless situation. We're stuck here forever. There's going to be no more Yerushalayim. There's going to be no more going back to God. This is the end of Judaism. And Yechezkel is saying, you're thinking that, but you're wrong. And he's giving the nevuah to fight that. And he's saying, Chai ani neum Hashem Elohim. God is swearing. Imlo biyad chazaka ubezroa netuya ubechema shefucha emlo chalechem. We're used to the terms of yad chazaka and zroa netuya from the Mitzrayim story, right? God will take us out with an outstretched arm, with a strong arm, right, against the Mitzrim. And here he's saying, with all this power that God has, emlo chalechem. In other words, God says, I'm going to be your king despite you, right? You people may have rejected me, which is why this whole thing happened. But God is swearing here, no, of all the options that we raised above, whether or not you want it, I'm still there, right? I'm still going to be your God. And now we have very similar to Yetziat Mitzrayim. V'hotzeti, right? V'hotzeti, v'yitzalti, v'ga'alti, right? V'hotzeti etchem min hamim. I will take you out from all these nations. V'kibatzti etchem min ha'aratzot asher nefotzetem bam. And I'm gonna gather you from all the lands that you have been dispersed in. Biyad chazaka u'bezroa netuya u'bechema shfucha. I'm going to use all that power to, again, like Mitzrayim, to take you back. And again, we have the fifth Lashem Geula, ve'eveti. Ve'eveti etchem el midbar ha'amim v'nishpatati etchem sham panim el panim. I'm going to judge you, right? Kasher nishpatati et avotechem, just like I judged your forefathers, b'midbar eretz Mitzrayim, ken nishpot etchem neum Hashem. Right? We needed we needed the 40 years of the desert to basically get our act together, right? And that's God saying we're going to have a similar process of, you're going to go through some sort of process of judgment after I take you out, but I will, like Mitzrayim, take you out and force you to be your God. Ve'evarti etchem tachat hashevet. Veheveti etchem b'masoret habrit. I'm going to bring you under my staff, my rod, and I'm going to return you to the tradition of the brit, of the covenant. Uvaroti mechem hamordim v'haposhim bi. The baroti, this verb, is usually used for like if you have a if you have a piece of agricultural land and you have to remove the rocks before you can plow it, right? First you have to take out all the stuff you have nothing to do with, and it's in the way, right? That's what this is usually used for, this verb. He's saying, I'm going to use this verb, I'm going to remove from among you the mordim, those who rebelled and those who sinned against me. In other words, God is going to do his process of judgment. He's going to remove all the people who are unworthy. I'm going to take them out of their Eretz Mugurayim. I'm going to take them out of the places they live. Admat Yisrael lo yavo. Those people are not going to return to Eretz Yisrael. Those people who rebelled against me, those people who are undeserving, are going to, I'm rejecting them. V'yadatem ki ani Hashem. And you will know from this that I am God. However, the rest of you, v'kibatzti etchem min ha'aratzot asher nefotzem, I'm going to gather you from the lands that you have been dispersed in. V'nikdashti bachem le'inei hagoyim, and through you there's going to be a kiddush Hashem, because there's going to be this revival. V'yidatem ki ani Hashem, and you, the remnant, the rest of you are going to realize that I am God. V'havi'i etchem, when I bring you back, el admat Yisrael, back to the land of Israel, el haaretz asher nasati et yadi latet otah, the land that I promised to your forefathers. Okay, so here we have a nevuah that starts with Yechezkel saying to the people, well, you assume that this is the end. You assume that you're just going to assimilate, you're going to be like all the goyim. So I have news for you, right? God has this following message for you. Those of you who are completely rejecting God, who are completely rebellious, who are completely sinning, you're right. They're gone. God is not interested in you anymore. But the rest of you, like it or not, right? Just like he was able to take you out of Mitzrayim, right, which was the poster child of God's, military strength and miracles and whatever. Just like back then he took you out of Mitzrayim, he'll take you out of this galus too, and he's going to bring you back to the Brit. He's going to be your king again. He's going to be your God again, and bring you back to the land that he promised to your forefathers. I talk a lot. Anybody want to say anything? Something?
It
Anything?
reminds me of what's happening now, that's all.
Everything. Everything. If Melissa allows me, I'm going to I'll take a break at some point and give you over the shir that I heard from Rav Samet, which is, if it's not exactly what's happening in the news now, it's really darn close. There's so many things that, like, every time I read about any war that's going on, it's unbelievable. Plishtim were always our enemies in Tanakh. We had other
Our enemies are always called the Plishtim.
no, whatever. The Plishtim, the people who live in Gaza,
Yeah.
right?
We're
always all right. We had friendly relations at times with Bavel, at times with Ashur, at times with Mitzrayim, at times with Edom, all the nations above. Gaza was always our enemy. So anytime you reach any story about Plishtim in the Tanakh, it's just history. It's unbelievable.
If you look at history, you will see that a lot of the pirates came from there.
Pirates?
They were the people who were not.
Yeah.
They were the pirates of the Mediterranean.
Yeah. They're called Me'iyei Hayam. They came from the sea. That's yeah, indeed. Only with less good music.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes? No. Okay, I want to look at another nevuah now. This one's from Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu was a Navi. He's a tragic Navi, right? He spent 30 years, more or less, in Yerushalayim before the Churban, telling people again and again, mend your ways, guys, because you're going to get Churban, you're going to get Galut. And people looked at him and said, well, you're a traitor, right? How can you possibly say that the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed? That can't be, right? And if you're saying that, that's a problem. And if Yirmiyahu kept saying, surrender to Bavel, it'll go better for you. How can you surrender to the enemy? They threw him in jail. They threw him in a pit. They threatened him with death. He was miscan, right? For 30 years, or plus minus, he prophesied that this is exactly what's going to happen. And then, when it happened, he was one of the people who he remained actually after the Galut, and then he went down with the remnant to Mitzrayim. This part of Yirmiyahu is when he's still in Yerushalayim. You know what? Let's look at the timeline here, because it tells us when this happens. Ve'ela divrei hasefer asher shalach Yirmiyah hanavi miYerushalayim el yeter ziknei hagola ve'el hakohanim ve'el hanevi'im ve'el kol ha'am asher higla Nebuchadnezzar miYerushalayim Bavela. Here is the message, the scroll that Yirmiyahu a Navi sent from Yerushalayim, right? Because he remained in Yerushalayim, to the remnant of the elders in the Golah, and to the Kohanim, and to the Nevi'im, and to all the people that Nebuchadnezzar exiled from Yerushalayim to Bavel. When? Achrei tzet Yechoniah melech hamelech v'agvira v'asarisim sarei Yehuda v'Yerushalayim v'acharash v'amazger Yerushalayim. Remember, said last week we said historically there were three pi'imot, three stages of the exile. The first was the northern kingdom. That was the Assyrians. 150 years later, we had the cream of the Jerusalem society. We had the king, and we had the
high priest.
What?
The high priest.
So we had the king, we had the priests, we had the ministers, we had the white collar workers, right? We had the upper crust. They left, and 11 years later, right? 11 years later, the rest were exiled. Okay, so we're talking in the period after the first, the top echelon left, and all the Nebuchs are still left before they got exiled and before the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. That's when he's writing this letter. And he's saying like this. Here's his nevuah to them. Ko amar Hashem tzvaot Elohei Yisrael. This is God's message. L'kol hagolah asher higleti miYerushalayim Bavel. To all the people who have been exiled from Yerushalayim to Bavel. Pay attention. This is interesting. He's telling them like this. Benu batim, build houses, v'shevu, and dwell in them. V'nit'u ganot, and plant gardens. V'ichlu et piryan, and eat its fruit. In other words, settle in, right? Settle in long enough that when you plant gardens, you're there long enough to even enjoy the fruit, okay? Settle in, he says, in Bavel. K'chu nashim, take yourselves wives, holidu banim uvanot, take sons and daughters, and give birth to sons and daughters, and take for your daughters wives, k'chu b'nechem nashim, v'et b'notechem titnu la'anashim, and give your daughters to other people, vatiladna banim uvanot, and let them have sons and daughters, urevu sham ve'al tam'itu. We're already talking third generation, right? He says, go, settle down, build yourselves houses, build yourselves gardens, have children. When the children grow up, marry them off, let them have children, all right? He's describing don't live out of your suitcases, right? Don't think that when you're going to Bavel, it's going to be quick. You're going to settle in there, but this is not forever. Don't settle in forever. Ki ko amar Hashem, ki lefi milot levavel 70 shana. God said that when 70 years in Bavel are filled, after 70 years, efkod etchem, God is going to come back. V'hakimoti alechem et devari hatov la'ashiv etchem el hamakom hazeh, and I'm going to fulfill my my positive prophecy to return you to this place, to Israel, right, to Yerushalayim. V'nimtzeti lachem neum Hashem v'shavti et shvutchem. I will be there with you, and I will return your exiled, and I will kibatzti etchem mikol hagoyim. I'm going to gather you from all the goyim and all the nations and all the places asher hidachti etchem, that I, God, dispersed you. Right? God is taking here. He's taking responsibility. Right? It's not. I didn't lose. I decided to have you dispersed there, and I am going to, after 70 years, return you, Neum Hashem. V'ashivoti etchem el hamakom asher higleti etchem misham. Okay. So here we have a right? We have the beginning and the end of a description of the beginning and the end of this period of galut, right? On the one hand, yes, you're going to have galut, and you're going to have galut, and it's going to be the second and the third generation. You're going to sit, you're going to settle in, you're going to have children, you're going to have children's children. It's going to be, but this is not forever. He's telling them right ahead from the head, like you have the light at the end of the tunnel, and you have a deadline, right? There's a hard stop for this. After 70 years, God will return you back to Israel. Okay, what I skipped here in these few dots over here is he also says pray for the peace of the city that you're in, right? Which is possibly why Jews in Chutz La'aretz say Tfilah l'Shlomo Dinah, God save the queen, even in Shul, right? We pray for the people that we're among, because if we are friendly towards the Malchut is going to be friendly towards us, right? If we remain a small rebellious group, that's not going to go so well for us. And as long as the Babylonian, let's say, economy is good, then the Jews can also enjoy it, right? So enjoy your time, or I don't know, enjoy it, but certainly settle in Bavel. But keep in mind that you're coming back.
Also, if things are calm, then they won't be looking for causes for the upset. And of course, the first place to look for anything wrong is at the Jews. So
Clearly. But this is sort of a warning. He doesn't say, but don't be too happy there. All right. But but there is also that Shivim Shana means you're not staying there forever. Don't assume, like you said before, you're not going to assimilate and be part of everybody, and that's the end of the line. Right? There is like we said before, the options. God will take you back. Okay, this is not a forever exile. This is an exile because God decided it, and God is also from preempting, right, the end of this, and he's already telling you that this is only going to be for 70 years. 70 years is a long time, but it has an end. Okay, I thought I got rid of this. We did this. Okay. This is one more nevuah that I want to look at. This is a very famous nevuah. It's an haftorah also. This is the Chazon Ha'atzamot Yeveshot, the prophecy, the vision of the dry bones. Okay, which is where Dry Bones gets its name from, the comic strip. Okay, this is the vision of the dry bones in Yechezkel, which also gives us some sort of sense of what the people were feeling. We're back to Yechezkel. Yechezkel says like this: Haita alai yad Hashem v'yotzieni v'ruach Hashem. God took me out and placed me, presumably prophetically. In other words, this is a vision that he sees. B'toch habik'ah, he placed me in the valley. Why can't I get my thing? In the valley, v'hi mele'at samot. He sees a valley full of dry bones. Vayomer elai ben adam, and God said to me, Hatichyena ha'atzamot ha'ela, could these bones ever live again? Va'omar Hashem Elokim ata yadata. In other words, the dry bones are I think symbolic of people in Galut, right? This is the symbol of the perception of this is the end of the line, right? God is going to exile. God had enough with us. Even if God didn't lose and God is strong and God chose to give us this exile and destruction as a punishment, he's not going to want us back. That's the vision. That's the symbolism of that Yeveshot. Something that cannot something that can't be revived, right? We can no longer revive our connection with Kadosh Baruch Hu. And God is saying to Yechezkel, will these bones ever live again? Meaning, is there possibility of revival for all these lost souls, right? And Yechezkel says, I don't know. God, you know. You tell me. Who am I? I don't know. And God says to Yechezkel, Hinabe al ha'atzamot el, a prophecy to these dry bones. Va'amarta lahem, and tell these bones, ha'atzamot ha'yeveshot shim'u dvar Hashem. O ye dry bones, listen to what God has to say. Quote, Ko amar Hashem Elokim la'atzamot el. So says God to these bones. Hine ani mavi bachem ruach v'chitem. I am going to revive you, says God. Right? And Yechezkel Nibeti kasher tziveti, Yechezkel prophecies to the dry bones that he sees, as he was told. He says, God will tell you, you will revive. Vayhi kol kehinabi, and there's this great sound as I am saying this, says Yechezkel. V'hinei ra'ash, and some sort of tumult, some great noise or earthquake or something. Vatikrevu atzamot etzem el atzmo, v'ra'iti hinei alehem gidim uvasar alehem ve'ikram alehem. As I'm watching this, says Yechezkel, I see the bones connect to each other, and I see the sinews, and I see the muscles, and I see the meat, and it's turning into what looks like bodies and not dry bones. In other words, God is able to revive what seems lost. But these are still dead bodies. They're fully dead bodies, but if there's no spirit in them, right, they're not going to live. Doesn't matter if you have a complete body, they're not going to live. And this, I think, is symbolic of the fact of these people who, even if they're not completely dead and lost in Galut, they're busy with their gardens and their children's and their weddings, and spiritually they're lost, right? They could be alive, but they're alive somewhere else. So what's the use of that, right? There's no connection there. Spiritually, they're gone.
Right.
So then God tells him like this. Vayomer Elai, he says to me, Hinabe el haruach. Whoa, sorry. Prophecy to the ruach, to the spirit. Hinabe ben adam, prophecy, man. Va'amarta el haruach, and tell the ruach, Ko amar Hashem Elokim. This is what God is commanding you, ruach. Me arba ruchot boi haruach. From all corners of the land come the ruach. Ufchi baharugim ha'ele v'hichyu, and be instilled in these dead bodies and have them be alive again. V'hinabeti ka'asher tzivani, and I prophesied as I was commanded. V'tavo bahem haruach, and the ruach, the spirit, came into these dead bodies. V'yichyu, and they lived, they came to life. Vayamdu al raglehem, and they stood up on their feet. Chayil gadol meod meod, a huge number of people. And now he gets the explanation. Vayomer Elai, and God says to me, Ben Adam, ha'atzamot ha'ele, these bones that you've seen this happening to, kol Beit Yisrael hema, they are all of Beit Yisrael. Hine omrim, they say, Yavshu atzmotenu, our bones are dry. Va'avdat tikvatenu nigzarnu lanu, and our hope has been lost. This is where we get odlo avdat tikvatenu from the tikva, right? Well, these people are saying our drones are dry. Everything is lost. We have no hope anymore. Lachen hinabe, and therefore, God says to Yechezkel, hinabe va'amartalem, prophecy, and tell them. So say God, Hine ani potech et kivrotechem, I'm opening your graves. And I'm going to raise you up from out of your graves, my nation, Ami. God is still our God, and we are still his people. Ve'eveti etchem al admat Yisrael, which is a lovely prophecy, and very full of hope and very full of nice stuff. Except I think it also reflects the mindset, right, of the people, right? The ones who said, how could we possibly worship God in Galut, right? Maybe there's no more disconnect, right? And the ones who said we're going to be like all the nations, we're going to assimilate, we're going to go worship, right? We're just going to be people in Iowa, right? Eventually, our grandchildren are not going to marry Jews, and that's going to be the end of that, right? And he's saying no. The ones who are completely rebellious against me, like Dafka next, right? Those I'm going to get rid of, right? But the rest, I'm going to revive them. I'm going to, just like in Egypt, I was able to, God says, I was able, b'yad chazaka v'zrav and tuyah, to choose and pick my people and bring them out of Egypt and bring them to the promised land. I can do it again. And I will do it again. And that's a prophecy. 70 years, hold out, live your lives, raise your children, raise your grandchildren, and I will bring you, and I will bring the remnant back. And that's the promise, right? The promise to these people who have basically lost hope. I want to show you one more thing. At the beginning we saw all these psukim from Yechezkel, right? The visions with the kruv, right, and the Shechina that goes up and goes out. He has one more. If you look, this is Perek Tet, Perek Yud Aleph, and this is Mem Gimel. Toward the end of the book, Yechezkel has all these visions of what's going to happen after. And here's his last vision regarding the Shechina business. V'hinei kvod Elohei Yisrael ba miderech hakadim. And here I see the Shechina coming, not going, coming from the east, not going to the east, coming from the east. Uchvod Hashem, and the Shechina ba el habayit. The Hashem, the Spirit of God, or the Shechina comes to the bayit, to the Beit HaMikdash. Derech shar asher panav derech hakadim, through the gate that is facing east. But tasi'eni ruach, Yechezkel says, and the ruach raised me and brought me el hachatzer pnimi, to the inner court. V'hinei melek kvod Hashem habayit, and kvod Hashem, the Spirit of God, or the Shechina, is filling the bayit. Vayomer elai ben adam, et makom kis'i ve'et makom kapot raglai asher ishkan sham betoch bnei Yisrael la'olam. And God says to me, this is my place of my throne, and the place where I stand, right? We've got a place where I will dwell within Bnei Israel forever. So that's what we have, the Nevuat Nechama that Yechezkel sees after he sees the Shechina leaving. He has this vision that the Shechina is going to return. And I'm not showing you the Nevuot of Yeshayahu, but Nevuot Yeshayahu from Perek Mem till the end, which is Perek Samach something, 20-something Prakim, which is what we read during the Sheva Nechemta, the 7 Shabbat Haftarot after Tisha B'Av, Nachamu Nachamu Ami, right, all that, is filled with, I will bring you back and everything's going to be wonderful and etc. A lot of that wonderful stuff. I'm going to now burst the bubble and give you a spoiler alert. This didn't happen. Okay, and that's going to be part of the problem. What happened, as we're going to see, what happened is that, yes, after 70 years, people had the opportunity to come back, and we're going to see that people did come back. And after 70 years, people did have the opportunity to rebuild Beit HaMikdash, and people, in fact, did rebuild Beit HaMikdash. That's the second temple. But it was not nearly as glamorous as the first Beit HaMikdash. And more than that, we see here this nevuah of Kvod Hashem Malay Tabayit. I'm going to show you, I don't have it here, so I'll show you next week, of the Gemara that says that there were 5 things that were missing from the second Beit HaMikdash that were in the first Beit HaMikdash. The Aron, the Kruvim, the Shechina, the Urim V'Tumim, right? All the things that the Nevuah, right? Well, not Nevuah, all the things that implied the connection between God and Israel, all the things that made the Beit HaMikdash sanctified, right? The Holy of Holies, all that stuff we didn't have in the second Beit HaMikdash. Not only that, but we're also going to see that the situation in Israel at the time was pretty grim. The economy was bad, and we had the nasty Samaritans to the north, and we didn't have our own independence. There was no Melucha. Things were pretty shabby. Okay, and that and then you raise the question, and if you want to look, Adele, at modern times, and let's go to, let's say, 1948 is a good time to compare it to. Are we forcing the return? Sorry?
I was alive then.
You were alive then. Okay, so you may remember this, but you don't. But is when we came back, let's say, let's remove ourselves from Beit Sheni, when we came back to Israel, there are those among us who say, this is Atchalta de Geula, and this is the beginning of Yod HaMashiach, and this is, right, we're finally allowed to go back, and we're going to rebuild our country, and we're going to, as we see, there's no Beit HaMikdash here yet. As we see, we have plenty enemies here still yet. As we see, there's no Nevuah, there's no, right? So some of us could look at this and say, Atchalta Geula, this is the way it happens, right? But you can have the other opposite thing and say, well, this is just, pretend. This is forcing things. There's no God in any of this process. Just because a bunch of people decided to come and stake their flag here and build things and call their friends and neighbors and say, come, we're starting a Jewish state, doesn't mean that God wants this, doesn't mean that God is here, doesn't mean that God is interested, doesn't mean that there is a God, doesn't mean anything. It just means that a bunch of people want to live here. So what? right? And those are two totally opposite, right? Opposite mindsets.
Many of them
now-
only want to live here because they had no place else to go. Nobody else would take them. A lot
That's
of-
fine. That's fine. That's a different issue. Okay, but I'm talking about those among us who say Atchalta the Geula, and this is the beginning of the Acharit Hayamim, the end of days process, and this is going to eventually lead to Beit Hamikdash Shlishi, and right. I'm talking about that, right? Now, if you take what happened, that whole thing, and put it back on Beit Sheni,
Yeah.
and they didn't have independence like we have independence. They
Right.
didn't particularly have security. Now, our security is pretty grim at the moment too, but they didn't have security. They didn't have independence. They had a Beit HaMikdash like we don't, but there was no outward siman that was anything other than a building that they decided to build, right?
Right.
But the Nevi'im at the time, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, they were the ones who had to convince the people that this was what God wanted, and God was with them. And despite all the outward whatever, this was their geula, and this was their, and it really didn't feel that way, especially as we're going to see, and Ezra, especially for those who were old enough to remember. You said you were around in 1948. Those of them who were alive and remembered when their grandfather or their great grandfather took them to the Beit HaMikdash for Hakel or for Sukkot, and they remembered the splendor and they remembered what was going on. They say this. Right, so there's going to be have to be a lot of convincing going on to convince people that this is really the fulfillment of the nevuot of after 70 years, and God is going to bring you back, and God is still, there's the brit is still on, and you should still, right, as opposed to this is just a bunch of people pretending God is not interested in you anymore, right, and who are you kidding? So that's the, I think, mindset that we're going to be dealing with throughout more or less the entire period of Beit Sheni that we're going to be looking at. It's grim. I mean, it's full of hope because after 70 years, they did have the opportunity to come back, and people did come back, right? And did stake a claim in the land, which we pretty much have today. But for the people who were living through it, that there had to be some sort of kvetch that said, is this really the Nebuot Yeshayahu? Is this really what it is that we were looking forward to? Right. So you have both. You have this is not it, but we're here, right? We're back here, and for those of us who believe that Kadosh Baruch Hu is with us, we can continue with our avodah, and we can continue. We have a Beit HaMikdash. We could do the avodah in Beit HaMikdash. We even have Nevi'im. We can listen to what we could do just as far as we could do. But it's, again, the kvetch that it's not as wonderful. Maybe that's maybe the wonderful part is where we're headed today. We should be so lucky, right?
I have my doubts.
Okay. Huh?
I'm very pessimistic.
Nah, come on.
Oh yeah.
Listen, if we don't win this war, you're not going to be around to know it, so it's all good.
Thank you. That really.
And if we do win this war at the end of World War III, then maybe there's a Beit HaMikdash at the end of it.
But which war are we fighting?
Now,
Yeah.
stay tuned to the news.
Nah, they don't tell the break. They only tell what.
I think we're only going to know in retrospect,
For
Right.
sure. For sure.
right? Which is really hell for the people who have to make the prospect decisions that are going to be judged retrospectively. So
Right.
we have 10 more minutes. This is the background I wanted to give you, but you know what? Since we have 10 minutes, let's look also at let's start one chapter in Daniel. Okay, let's look a little bit at Daniel, with your permission. Daniel Perek Aleph is pretty easy because it's still in Hebrew.
Last week you talked about the different online translations and stuff. Did you also do Al HaTorah for the translation, or you didn't discuss that
I
option?
don't remember. I could show you Al HaTorah.
Okay, no, never mind. I'll look at your recording. I don't remember what you said last
I
time.
don't remember either. I don't remember being
Okay. I was just
like I
curious.
wasn't giving a skira. I probably didn't mention
Okay.
Alatorah because I wasn't doing a. This is everything. Yes, alatorah.org has good translation. Sefaria
Okay.
has good translation too. This is Sefaria.
Perfect.
Okay. If we're going to be looking at it in Hebrew because it's Hebrew. When if we get to Aramaic, then we'll switch to add to the look. If you do this, you can do English Hebrew, right? Isn't that cool? Or you can even do only in English. Isn't that nice? So when we get to the Aramaic, we're going to be doing both. But now I'd like to do the Hebrew because every translation is always, always some sort of a interpretation of sorts. And some words are not, could be interpreted in one way or the other. And people who do the translation have to pick whatever they're picking. Whereas now, if I do the translation, then you have to believe me that that's the translation. Or you can look up a Farshim or whatever. Okay, I want to look up. I want to look at from a little bit at Daniel Perek Aleph. Who is Daniel? Daniel Perek Aleph starts like this. Incidentally, let me just give you 2 words of background about Daniel. Daniel is probably the last book that made it into Tanakh before Tanakh was canonized and closed. The book after that would have made it in but didn't is called Ben Sirah, which is very similar to a lot of Tanakhi books. But that's Chazal said that the cutoff date was after Daniel, and that's it. Okay, so Daniel is probably the latest we have historically. It mentions even things like Greece. Okay, so it's a later book. Christians love Daniel because it's full of apocalyptic stuff, and they consider Daniel a Navi. Chazal do not consider Daniel a Navi, which even though God speaks to him, which is why he's put in Ketuvim and not in Nevi'im. One more thing.
Esther? What about Esther?
Esther is from an earlier period, about the same period, but Esther, I think Daniel was canonized later than Esther. They're talking about the same period, more or less. Okay. But Daniel reaches farther. It starts about the same time, but it reaches farther in the history forward than Esther does. Right? Esther is very limited in time. Daniel goes on for a long time. Daniel has 12 chapters. The first 6 are stories, and the second 6 are weird apocalyptic visions. Daniel starts off in Hebrew and ends off in Hebrew, and the middle section, somewhere between Gimel something and Chet, are in Aramaic. So the overlap of Aramaic and Hebrew is not the same as the 6 chapters of story and apocalypse, which is why it helps claim that Daniel is one book, because it's easy to say it's 2 books if it's one story, one set of stories and one set of visions. But since the Aramaic cuts off both of them, it looks like one book. It's a very odd book. Okay, but fun. I'm not touching ever the second half of it. We're going to start with Daniel Aleph, just to give us a background a little bit. We have 6 minutes of how people again, the mindset, and if we need later, we're going to do some more of Daniel, just because I like Daniel. Bishnat shalosh lemalchut Yoyakim melech Yehuda. Remember Yoyakim, the last king of Yehuda, right? When he was 3 years in a king, ba Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel Yerushalayim vayatzer aleh. Okay, that's how we left off at the end of last week. That's the cutoff time of the Churban, right? Nebuchadnezzar came and besieged Yerushalayim. Now here is Daniel's interpretation for all of those who are wondering if God lost. Vayiten Hashem biyado et Yoyakim melech Yehuda, and God gave into his hands, into Nebuchadnezzar's hands. In other words, God gave Nebuchadnezzar this victory. Not Nebuchadnezzar beat God. Okay, we're not having, and this is very clear according to Daniel, that God was in charge, and God deliberately gave Yehoyakim melech Yehuda over to Nebuchadnezzar, and also Miktzat Klei Beit Elohim, some of the vessels from the Beit HaMikdash, and Nebuchadnezzar brought them Erech Shinar to the land of Bavel, Beit Elohav to the house to his temple, to Nebuchadnezzar's temple, Veit HaKelim hivi Beit Otzar Elohav, and the vessels from the Beit HaMikdash he brought to the Vatican vaults. Okay, so we have here clearly the beginning. We hear that there was the Nebuchadnezzar came, and Daniel tells us because God gave him this victory. And here we have the story of Daniel. I'm going to go over it quickly. The king said, "Bring me some of the finer youth of royal stock, children who are healthy, children who are smart. Bring them to Heichal HaMelech, bring these children to the palace. Ulilamdam Sefer Uleshon Kasdim, and teach them." Basically, Lashon Kasdim is the language of the Babylonians. Teach them the language and Sefer and the culture of Babylon. Why is it that the king of the Nebuchadnezzar wants to have these royal children raised with Babylonian cultural knowledge and language?
So they'll go back and influence the rest of the people.
So what the rest of the people in here?
So they'll go back and influence the rest of the people.
Right, I don't think go back, because they're not going back
Oh,
anywhere.
no, but go back if they're in the palace to go
But
out.
these are who people who Am Yisrael considers the leadership or the future leadership, right? Because these are people from royal stock. These are the children of the leaders, right? And so if you can enculturate,
Acculturate.
that up, huh? Acculturate. Thank you. If you're going to acculturate these children, and in a positive way, right? You're not forcing them. Right, but you're bringing them. We hear later he gives them food. He gives them, right. He takes care of them. But if you raise these children within Babylonian culture and Babylonian language, and then, like you said, set them out to the people, that's an easy way. It's an easier way to make these captives loyal citizens than to force them. You can't force people to like you, right? But if you can say, this is a great place to be, why don't you come to, I don't know, let's say New York, and join the local baseball team and eat a lot of apple pie and donuts, right? It's going to be very easy and comfortable to just become part of the culture, right? And that's the plan, right? That's his plan of easy acculturation, easily assimilation. Every day he gives them food and he gives them wine, and he says to raise them for 3 years, and give them. He tells his servants 3 years, give them all the best, right? Send them to the top, bring the top academies to them, private tutors, give them everything they need for 3 years, and then not clear if, and here I'm actually interested with the translation. So miksatam could be at the end. At the end of 3 years, bring them to the king, or it could be miksatam, and some of them, some of these youth who did this well enough, right, and got high enough marks, they're going to come and stand before the king. I'm just curious to see which of those two the translation chooses. We have a little mark here, at the end of which, right, or and some of them, right? It brings you both. Yeah. That's very clear. Do you see that? Either they were to educate 3 years, 3 years, or at the end of which, or and some of them, they would enter the king's service. Very cute. Okay, so they actually bring you both. Kolakova to Safaria.
It's like sending them to Harvard.
It's like sending them to Harvard on a full scholarship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And we hear that among them were Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the first thing, this is the last thing we're going to do now. The first thing that we hear, go away. The first thing that we hear, Vayasem lahem Sara Sarisim. This should sound familiar from Megillat Esther because it's the same culture, it's the same, right? Bavel, Paras. Vayasem lahem Sara Sarisim. Shemot, he renames them. We saw this also with the kings, that they renamed the kings. Vayasem le Daniel Belshazzar, he called Daniel Belshazzar, and the 3 friends became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, those are the 3 friends. Why is he changing their names? First of all, because if instead of calling the kid Yehuda, you call him John, right? He's more likely to assimilate. If you give them the name, it also shows that you are, in charge, right? And now they're going to be regular Babylonian kings. Kids, just one thing, Belshazzar starts with the word Bel, right? Bel is one of the Babylonian
Uh-oh,
gods,
uh-oh.
right? So it's like it's a theophoric name. It's like something El or something Yah or something, right? Those are his names, and so Bel, he's even giving him a kind of divine, a Babylonian divinity name. Okay, so you know what, we're gonna continue this next time because I like Daniel, but this is the Babylonian plan of acculturating people, and if they become, and this is the danger, right? Because if you look at the Shivim, the Banu Batim Ushvuhem, if you become too comfortable in the land, it's going to be very, very difficult to want to make Aliyah. Okay, and that's where we are. The Seder, and then 75 years later, people charter private planes to come back and do Miluim, but that's only if we're lucky.
Ay.